for that composition. The evening is kind of thrown together, and I'm not going to get in the way too much. I'm just going to leave each of our guests here, Billy Goodrum at the far, Terry Adams, Tamara Mark, and was Bobby Mananosh? Just pulling your leg back.
I'm a Western resident. With all those other clowns.
Just pulling your leg here. But I'm just going to let them give their own impressions and whatever you guys would like. So, Jai Baba, go to it.
Jai Baba, I actually have a copy of Mehru's thing that, this is something that Mehru wrote, and it was read out in Mandalay Hall, and it's going to be in the lamppost, and it's not all that short, so I don't know if I should do it here tonight. It's really lovely though, but maybe I'll let other people talk, and then if we have time at the end, I'll read it out or something. Anybody want to?
Why don't you start with reading part of it? We want to hear it.
Okay. All right. So this was read in Mandalay Hall on August 21st. So the way that the events, well, it's dated August 21st. No, because she passed on the 19th, and then Meherazad was closed on the 20th, and then we were there on the 21st. Yeah. So it was the 21st.
No, Thursday was the 22nd. That's the day we were there. I remember I wrote it down. Yeah, because it was also some special. I know she wrote it the day before.
Yeah.
We're about to have our first fight of the whole trip. I don't know. Anyway, this is dated August 21st, which is the day that it was read in Mandalay Hall. And, oh, you're right. These memories were shared at a remembrance gathering for money in Mandalay Hall on 22nd August. Okay. Anyway, the way, just sort of the chain of events. I'll give a thumbnail sketch of the what happened. Over there, we first got news of Money's passing. Boy, I could actually. Anybody else want to start? Because I'll here. I was going to start with here.
Okay.
I'll just say, when we arrived on August 9th, we were met at the trust compound by Bao. And first of all, I got to say, Bao must have talked about 5, 6 different times about how much he missed the LA group. At one point, even taking Tamara's and my hands and saying in very hushed tones, he says, you know, the LA, I forget exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of like, the LA group, you know, some of these other people just don't quite, you know, do it for me or something. He's talking about the energy of the LA group and how much he enjoyed having us there, you know, sitting in the front row for his talks and laughing and you know, getting into the spirit of things. At any rate, he met us on the 9th, and it was on that day he had gone to see Money that morning. And he said to us that Money was no longer existed for the world. She existed only for Baba. And he later on would say that when other people were saying she was in a coma, he said, you know, really speaking, this was not a coma. Not a coma like the way that normal people or the way that we understand comas. He said that she was no longer there. And that he said that Baba was coming closer and closer to her in order to bestow his final kiss on her. And so that was, I think prior to the day that we'd arrived, there was an awful lot of anxiety and grief and sadness among the Mandalay because she was really suffering physically and going through very difficult times, and I think this has been going on for quite a while. And then I think that the day that we got there and then the day afterwards is when she began to, they really felt like she'd gone to a different place. And so there wasn't as much, even among the Mandalay, everyone was a little lighter in hearts, and I think that there was more of a sharing, sort of joyfully reminiscences of Money, rather than this constant anxiety that they'd been suffering prior to that. Anyway, on the actual day of her passing, which came like 9 days after we got there, on the 19th, we got the word about it up at the tomb. Ted Judson had just finished the last song before going down to breakfast, the last song of Morning Artie, which was Happy Trails, appropriately enough. And Alan Wagner came up and with trembling voice and kind of holding back tears a bit, said that Money had passed that morning at 7:01, which led us all to wonder how they'd ever decided on the time, because if you've been in Meherazad, every clock has a different, you know, time on it. But Pat, I think, had been there and had looked at her watch at the time and decided, okay, it's 7:01. And So everyone went down. We went down to breakfast, and I'll let everybody else kind of talk about what happened for the rest of that day. But on that day, she was placed in what they called her final repose, so that we were able to file past her in Mandalay Hall. Then that morning we went over to Meherazad, and we saw her in Mandalay Hall at Meherazad. She was placed in front of Baba's chair there. And if you've seen Heather's description of that day, it's really beautifully done. We can talk more about it here and about some of the impressions, because it was amazing how her face just looked like marble or something. There were no traces of the pain that had been there for the weeks before. And although she hadn't been taking hardly any nutrition, she didn't look, wan or she didn't look emaciated or anything. She looked glowing and radiant. And so everyone filed past her there. Then in the afternoon, she was brought to Meherazad, where there was a number of sort of ceremonies, and there was a service up on the hill, and then brought down to lower Meherazad, alongside the Pilgrim Center. Kind of if you're going out the door of the Pilgrim Center, and here's the hill, off to your left, there's some fields there, and there's some cremation platforms there. And so she was brought down there and covered with first flowers that people laid on her, and then sandalwood, and then finally large pieces of wood. And then the torches were lit by Sohrab and Rustom, her nephews. Also Jamshed, who was her grandnephew, Dara's son Jamshed, and Rustom's son Meherdil, and Dara, Irani as well. And then they, amidst great cries of Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai, that went on for hours, it seemed like, and they lit her pyre there. The fire burned for 3 days. Usually these fires burn for 1 day, but this was an extraordinarily hot fire, and anyone who knew money shouldn't be at all surprised at the heat and the love that she radiated, and it seemed to come out in this fire. I'm trying to kind of hurry along. I don't mean to take it from you guys or anything, but I'm just trying to put out some of my impressions. One interesting thing, and Heather writes about it, and so these are kind of legends that will spring up and that will be there. A couple of sadhus happened to be going by on the road, and they came down to see what was happening, and they went to Erich, and they asked who was being cremated, because normal cremations apparently give off a black smoke, and these sadhus had seen that this was a bluish white smoke, and they said that is the sign of an advanced soul being cremated. Mahatma Devi, Mahat Devi. And so meaning that this was a great goddess being cremated, and apparently when they were told it was Meher Baba's sister, then they said, oh, okay, then of course. So it was an extraordinary day, and I'll let the other people sort of try to sum up some of it. Yeah.
Make sure everyone in the back can hear okay?
Can everyone in the back hear? Okay, all right. So 2 days later, on Thursday, everybody went to, actually Monday, that was Monday, right? So it was 3 days later, so that was on a Monday, so it was on Thursday that we gathered in Mandalay Hall in Meherazad, and people just shared reminiscences or thoughts about money. And of course there was always music all the time. The music never, from the moment we were filing past her body in Mandalay Hall, Ward Parks and some other people were singing, and then Ted Judson was singing. And so anyway, so this is from Meru, that morning as we were reminiscing about money. She says, Baba's dear ones gathered here today, we greet you with Jai Meher Baba. Our beloved one, the highest of the high, the omnipotent and omnipresent, is the one who brought us all here. He is the one who will ever be our friend and our guide all the way on our journey home to him. For his beloved sister Money, as it was for his beloved Mara, the journey has been completed and they are in blissful reunion with their beloved Lord. For the moment, in all our hearts there is a bottomless grief for our loss that only his love sustains and helps us to bear. I have known them both all my life, and was fortunate that all my adult life with Baba I was permitted to be so close to Mara and Money. It was a privilege and honor for me to be with Money and help care for her in her time of need. They were not always painful times for us in the hospital. Baba's and Mara's love was around us, and those precious times when we talked of them and remembered them or sang to them. especially since Money initiated the singing, are for me truly beautiful memories imprinted on my heart for always. And we have felt all the love and good wishes and prayers of our Baba family the world over pouring in on her behalf in oceanic waves. He holds the key, and it was so easy for him to turn it on her behalf. But Baba's ways are unfathomable, and he, who is all-merciful and eternally benevolent, sees so much beyond our limited vision into far infinity. No matter how much we pleaded and prayed for his Money's recovery, his is always the last say, the only say, as it has always been. And this Money wholly accepted. Money was so courageous and cheerful. Yet at one point in the hospital, when her spirits were very low, she said in a small voice while sitting on her bed, "If this is what he wants of me, I must have Baba on one side of me and Mara on the other," pointing to either side. I immediately came to her and, looking into her eyes, said in Gujarati, "Of course they will be. They are both here now with you, encircling you in their loving care," and I know she felt comforted. In the last week at Inlak's hospital, there was an urgency in Money, a yearning to return to Meherazad, to Baba's home, so filled with precious memories of her times with Baba and Mara. How could we know the time was to be so short? You want me to keep reading, or do you want to read one, or you want to read a page? Anybody?
Keep reading.
So I'll just go. Beloved Baba, in his tender caring of her, had gathered around his dear Money really wonderful dedicated helpers to care for her every need under Goher's supervision, especially Shelley, who was with her night and day. This great responsibility of caring for his sister was a privilege, an honor that touched each heart to its very core. Such an atmosphere of his presence and love coming through Money permeated all around. It was a gift of his Sahabas, which even in her frailest state she was giving to us each and all. At night time, we would all gather around her in her room, whether she was conscious of her or of us or not, and we would sing together Baba songs or talk of our times in Baba together. It was with reluctance that we left her presence. Every morning, as long as she was able to walk, Money would come to Baba's room for darshan. One day, after bowing down to the cast of Baba's lotus feet, she mentioned Mara's name. Not wishing to interrupt her darshan, I did not remember till next day to ask her about it. Quite matter-of-factly, she replied, "Yes, I see Mara continually. She is here all the time." And I knew that Baba was there too. She once tried to point him out to us and describe his radiant beauty. We felt their presence around very tangibly. Even when we were not with her, we felt Money with us all the time. Every night I always fell asleep remembering her, and often woke up several times in the dark thinking of Money and how she was doing. In the early hours of August 2nd, around 3 a.m., I was lying awake thinking of her when around 3:30 a.m. I heard these words. This was really beautiful. So in other words, this is Meru saying that these are words that she heard at that time. And she, as she says later on, and I knew it was from Money. And the words were, "I do not know when or how I go, but this I know, to where I go. It is to a place of indescribable beauty, where God's love enfolds completely." And then now Meru goes back to say, "And I know it was from Money. Knowing if I fell asleep I would forget the message, I got out of bed and scribbled it down on an old envelope I found." Well, you all know that in spite of all our heartfelt prayers, Money went to Baba, but in the gentlest way. Seeing her face and form relax beyond the bonds of pain is what sustained us all. She was now completely in her beloved's loving care, where her heart had yearned to be these many years, especially after Mara's passing from our midst. Our pain and grief for her suffering and our loss are beyond words. The 2 roses of Baba's garden are now hidden from our eyes, entirely in his care, in blissful reunion with their beloved. Looking back beyond these days into the past where Baba was so vital and present in our midst, the memory of those times with him are a treasure beyond measure. There were difficult times, not always comfortable times, but also beautiful and happy times, lighthearted and filled with joy. Even the times when we, Mara, Money, Goher, and I, were with Baba in the new life could be described as such, for in spite of the hardships, Baba was with us and we could laugh easily with carefree hearts. Once Mara and Money wanted to entertain Baba to amuse him when we were in Belgaum, and they felt Goher was their star performer. Poor Goher, so self-conscious, who took herself seriously, was persuaded, much against her inclination, to sing for Baba. The learning of the song took no time, but getting Goher to accept the idea of singing to Baba needed all Mara and money's persuasive powers. And this was read to us with Goher in the, right there too. So. At last the day came and Goher gave her performance. Baba listened with a very grave face and said, "What is this song you are singing to me?" And he repeated some of the words with a slight difference, which completely changed their meaning, and in mock surprise looked askance at Goher. Poor Goher was so overwhelmed with bashfulness she almost disappeared into the ground, protesting that Baba was teasing her. There are innumerable memories of such precious times with our three most beloved ones. The last journey with Mani to Meherazad, so this is after she'd passed, this is when they took her in the Swanee, which is the big vehicle there, and the women Mandali were all in it. The last journey with Mani to Meherazad was spent by all who accompanied her, just gazing at her beautiful face and delicate form, savoring those last moments of the time she was to be with us, and for me, in remembering her lifetime of service for her beloved Lord. What work she had done, what responsibility she had shouldered with love and grace and cheerfulness, and what joy and caring she had given to all around. This was reflected in the loving homage given to her by all who came to bow down to this perfect life lived in and for her god-brother. During the cremation, as with dazed and saddened heart I looked on, not really seeing, I suddenly realized that the flames were dancing with a joyful gladness, and I realized how happy Mani would have been watching them trying to spring higher and higher in the wind. And I asked Janet that Ted Judson, sing The Lord of the Dance. Observing the fire with more attentive eyes, just thinking about Ted singing that. Hey, Baba. Observing the fire with more attentive eyes, I saw a host of forms bowing towards Mani in humble adoration. And in the center I kept seeing Baba's face one moment and Zoroaster's face the next. It was deeply comforting. Naturally our tears also flowed freely for the loss of our sister in Meherazad. Quite wiped out with emotion, I heard Goher softly giving way to grief in her bed as I was entering Baba's room. I tried to console her as best I could and repeated Mani's words spoken to Heather in a dream. I don't know if you all heard about it. Heather Nadell had a dream in which Mani came to her and said, "You have no idea how much he loves me. You have no idea how much I love him. You have no idea how happy I am." So Meru repeated that to Goher. Then going into Baba's room, I heard Baba say in Gujarati, "She is mad to weep because Mani has come to me." And he repeated it again. "Because Mani has come to me, she's weeping. She's crazy." That night we all felt a lightness in our hearts, for we all felt that Mani had been freed from pain and was in indescribable bliss. May these two, whom Baba loved the best, ever be watching over us and guiding us. With beloved Baba, to help us to always please and obey him as he should be pleased and obeyed. One of Mani's frequent requests to Ted when we visited Baba's Samadhi was for him to sing, "Have thine own way, Lord," but she would always say, "Have it your way." And that was the way it was for her with Baba all her life, that it should be his way. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
I was thinking about, there's so many things that went on, but one thing that I wanted to share with you, which I thought was very precious, is the Usahavish kids made a book for Mani, a really beautiful book where they did their own drawing and wrote a poem or did a message for Mani, and that was the last thing that she read before she was before she went into a semi-conscious state. And she also saw the little book that the children from the LA Sahavas, they all put a book together. She saw that one as well. But the last one she read was all the messages from the kids at the youth Sahavas. So, and she remembered this one and point out this one. And I think it was Meru who mentioned that they would say all these kids that come to India, and Mani said, no, they're great souls. She thought of them as old souls that have been loving Baba, that have met Baba in the past. So she had a very soft spot in her heart for the youth Sahavas children and all the young people coming to Baba that are born in Baba families. So I just want to tell a story about Katie, my daughter, and the connections that these young people had with Mani are very, very strong. Okay, a little closer. Can everyone hear now? Okay. It's the day that Mani passed away to Baba. That morning, of course, we didn't know. We were up at Arti at 7 o'clock. We all began to say the Arti, and Katie, my daughter, was standing in front of me, and a little bit into the prayer, about a minute into the prayers, she went limp. She kind of felt like she was going to faint, and I grabbed her, and she was white as a ghost, and I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "I can't breathe." So she sat down, and somebody got her some prasad and water, and she was as white as a ghost. She was feeling very, bad. So after Arti, we came down early, so we weren't there when the message was given out that Mani dropped her body. We left immediately. And I took her down, and as we were walking down the hill, I said, "Katie, so did you have that little heart palpitation that you usually get? Are you hungry?" She goes, "No, Mommy, it's not like that." She said, "My heart stopped. I couldn't see, I couldn't hear. It was like I died for a second." And she goes, something's going on. There's something wrong. Something's happened. And so she was like in tears when she was walking down the hill. And of course, then when we got down, we got the message that later then that Mani had passed away. So Katie, my daughter, had a very close connection with Mani. And I think a lot of the young people, well, a lot of us do, but I know that a lot of the young people were very dear to her heart. And there were about 5 of the youth Sahabas kids, young guys, I think, and Billy, for 3 nights, because the flames in the fire of her pyre was so hot. And normally they watch it, they have a vigil over the ash and the fire. There's always somebody there. It's never left alone. So 5 of these young guys stayed up, including my son Eric, stayed up all night long. They didn't sleep. And then they slept during the day. Then they found out that, the fire is still hot, so they stayed up another night. And then, again, a 3rd night. So 3 nights in a row, they had no sleep at all. And they stayed by Mani. And they were all very committed to this. They all really wanted to do it. And I think Mani would have been very, very touched by that, how much they really love her. I just wanted to share that about the Youth Sahabas kids and that how special that was to them. Also, Mansari's dog, Mickey, I think it is, who never leaves the hill, stayed by Mani's ashes for 3 days and 2 nights. And dug himself in right next to it. He never comes down, and I guess he went up back for food, but came down and just sat there and stayed with her. Stayed by those ashes. That was so sweet. And so the animals knew, the birds knew, and we weren't able to do take any pictures or anything like that, or any recordings or any videoing, nothing. They didn't want anything. So I've made some sketches and detailed sketches of everything, and I'm going to put a book together eventually, and my little story of what I felt had happened at the time. But I look back at my drawings, and that next day of that moment, because it was all within 24 hours this happened, that I was going to burst, that I couldn't take any more. And then as soon as I felt that, I was completely emptied out, totally empty, and ready to just be filled up again. And this went on and on, being totally full and empty, full and empty. I can't really describe much more than that. And I know a lot of people after around 10 o'clock went back to the pyre, but I basically went and collapsed. It was such an incredible day. But I thought about everyone, everyone I knew, all the Babalus. I thought about you all when I was there and putting roses on for Mani. We bought all these single roses, and I thought about all of you. And all those roses were taken off and put in a blanket and then put back onto her. And she had saved through the years, this is like Mani, so practical, through the years, special pieces of sandalwood for her cremation. And they were all underneath her and put around her. And we all were able to put a piece of sandalwood on for her pyre. And so all these roses were then again, and garlands were put back on her. And then she was covered with another beautiful cloth. And then they built up the logs above her. And only the men, her family, all the men that were in her relatives and family were there that did all that. All the women were sat down and were back. And then they put ghee all over, the special ghee and the special powder. incense and everything. It was really quite lovely, and all the care they took to build this beautiful pyre, wood, I guess it was for her cremation, and they were the ones that lit it. And they must have said, Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai, something Mani. They must have said it 100 times. I mean, it just went on and on. Mani Ja. They said it over and over and over and over. And everybody, before they lit, everyone surged forward, and they were having to really fight people back. Villagers, people were coming, cars were coming from Pune, people were coming from all over for this, and they were having to hold people back because there was just this surge to be near her body just one more time and to say goodbye and to say, their goodbyes to her. And like Jeff said, she looked beautiful. She looked absolutely beautiful. She was, her head was wrapped in a beautiful dark rose pink chiffon scarf. She had a rose petal, a dark pinkish red rose petal up here, and a diamond, what are they called? Tila up here on her forehead. And then her one arm, I guess, was underneath, but she had a little white satin pillow was on her chest, and her hand was just like this. And it looked like marble. It was so beautiful. It didn't look emaciated. It looked just like she was sleeping. She looked like she was sleeping. And her arm was resting on a pillow like this, and it was covered in roses. And of course, everyone put roses all around her. And she had the most beautiful smile and radiant look on her face. And for a moment, she looked like Baba, and then she looked like Mani, and she looked like Baba, and it went back and forth, and it was just quite amazing. There was so much presence of Baba and Mera with her. So everyone was getting very charged with that presence of that darshan. It was like Baba was giving, and Mera was giving darshan to everyone that was there, and anyone who loved Vani. I felt like it was radiating out across the planet. And anyway, here.
Wow. It's hard to know where to start. I know that the first week that I was there, it was a joyous week, and yet there was an underlying feeling that you knew at any given moment that Mani was going to go. And I remember Saturday and Sunday at Meherazad, the day before she passed. I was very withdrawn, which is unusual for me, believe it or not. And I would ride on the bus and not talk to anyone. I was just, it was very internal. And I really felt that I was having my last moments with Mani. It just kept going through my mind, and I feel very grateful to Baba that I met Mani once when she was still very active. I'm sorry, I'm crying. And so when I was at Meherazad that day, it was really quite beautiful that, thank you. I just went into Baba's room, where Mani's room and Mera's room is, as you know, adjoining. I mean, they're like walls, they share a wall. And a lot of us, Terry and Lynn and Katie and Raina and I would sit on the wall, the bench that's right next to Mani's room. And that day, I couldn't leave. For 2 days, I just sat. I missed all the Mandalay Hall and the porch, and I couldn't move. It was like I was just in communion with Mani. And I was very sad, although at the same time, there was like, when I was in the room, there was such presence that I almost felt like I couldn't breathe, like she was almost on top of, it was like her energy was just with me. And it was really something, and yet it wasn't even sadness, it was beyond sadness, it was really just profoundly deep connection, I guess, is all I can say. And I know that after I came back Sunday afternoon, when we returned from Meherazad, I think it was Terry, Lynn and I all had to take a nap. I think we went in and we took like an hour nap, which we hadn't done. We hadn't had time for naps. And the moment I woke up from that nap, I felt fine. I felt light. I felt like myself again. I felt like I could be with people and talk with people. But those 2 days, I felt like even being in the presence of anybody was too painful. It was almost like it was just, I just didn't want to be talking or being with anyone but Baba and Mara and Mani. And so Monday, because I hadn't really slept well, I wasn't even at morning arti. When the word came down, I didn't make it up the hill that day. In fact, I think Raina and I didn't make it up the hill that day. I don't know who else was in the room, but I remember hearing the news. I was in the bathroom, the women's restroom, and everybody like broke down, and I don't know if I was in shock or I had had my moment or whatever, but I just felt joyous. I felt an absolute joy for Mani, that Mani was finally out of pain. So when we had to hurry to get to Meherazad and to walk in, I was really sort of overwhelmed because it was such a small group. You would think there'd be hundreds of people at this moment, and there we were, just such an intimate gathering of people. I was really overwhelmed at the gift that Baba gave me. So walking in, and we had to file past Mani's body was laid, as she said, like sort of perpendicular to Baba's chair. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a dead body in my whole life. And I thought what grace that was, that I would see God's sister as such a radiation of love and beauty, that there is no death, that it's totally a transcendence to Him. And I was really deeply moved, and to watch the people, there were people just in so much grief, and others that were really, you could tell, okay with it. But when I bowed down, I really did get really emotional. And I remember walking out, and Erich was there, and he goes, "What's the matter with you?" It's like, he just like, he took me and said, "What's wrong with you?" And he gave me a big hug. And he said, "You know, I loved your dance. I had danced on Sunday. I did have to do a dance before I went and withdrew into the room again with Sophie Ernst. Sophie had wanted to do something together, so we did a little something, and he brought that up in that moment. I thought, these Mandali are the most unbelievable people in the earth. So we had to go, and we all sat, the women on one side and the men kind of on another, and we just sang songs to Mani as people filed by, and it was just the most unbelievable thing I've ever experienced. And I know that the levels of what we all experienced is so incredibly profound that it's really, we won't know, like Gary Kleiner said, we won't know for years and ages the significance of the event of Mani passing in the earth, what the significance of the event was. And I as we left Meherazad, I got this strong urge to go buy garlands. Like, I never do anything like that in India. I mean, I'm so usually out of my body that I just can't do anything. I can't remember to do anything. And Shireen, Meherdil didn't go, but Shireen and I took a rickshaw, and we went into the market, and we went to the place where the Baba picture is, where they make garlands. And I placed an order for like 11 garlands. I mean, it was like some absurd number, and I didn't even know why I was buying so many. So we get them. We had to wait about 2 hours for them to complete making them. So we get in the rickshaws. Yeah, there was a search on garland. The town was inundated. Ahmednagar was like a wild place. So we were standing there, and they just kept making these beautiful garlands. It really was quite an event. And when we got back, I had bought, certain people had asked me to purchase garlands for them, and so I had. And I had promised Clea that I would buy a garland for Baba's Samadhi, and actually in that moment I felt that I should give it to Mani, and even though so I had placed one for Clea and Deborah and me and Michael, and then I had one after I'd passed them all out. There was one I thought of all of the LA people and everybody that I love here so deeply, and as we were sitting up at the place where Mani had been brought up to the, what's it called, the pandal that's next to the...
Samdap or something.
Sabha Manda.
Yeah.
Sabha Manda.
Well, thank you. After Mani had been, they brought her up the hill, and first they put her into Baba's Samadhi. they carried her in and laid her next to Baba. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to see this had this woman from New York, Michelle, I had given her a garland, just here's a garland for you. And out of the blue, she goes, Tamara, she like called me and brought me over, and we're looking in Baba's window, through the screen, and you could see Mani lying next to Baba.
When you hold on. When you walk into the tomb, there's the marble. There's some marble here, and then there's the two sides which they don't let you go on anymore. Anyway, so they put her stretcher on. So you're walking into the tomb. So on the left side, which would have been Baba's right, and she was there, and they said some prayer, I think, and sang a song. They did Arti first, and then brought her in and did prayers and song. And we were all pressing up against the window of the screen to look in, and I tell you, she looked so beautiful there. I tell you, as the day went on, she looked more and more radiant. And so she was lying there, and then they took her out and they brought her around and put her in between where Mara's shrine is and the wall to Baba's tomb. So they laid her there too and did more prayers, and more people came and put flowers on her there. Is that right? Yeah. And then they brought her up onto this, but it was quite beautiful. There were so many people by this time. There was more and more people were coming at this point, so there's quite a few here.
I'll heart tie it up here, and I'm like kind of hogging it here. And I just wanted to say that thank you. When we looked through where we stood and they brought Mara, and later next to Mara, RustomSohrab, it was one of the most powerful things I've ever witnessed, was to see almost a frenzy of their love for her. It was beyond anything I'd ever felt or experienced from any human being. It was beyond grief. It was just so incredibly powerful, and they just would keep saying Avatar Mer Baba Ki Jai, Mani Jai, Mani Jai, Mani Ja Ki Jai, and it was like it got like this whole fervor. It was almost like an energy of like a vortex of energy was created through their like absolute power of their love for her, and it really brought the group of people that had been gathered into such a heart place. I felt like everybody was so in shock that them arriving really brought like the heart back to remembering Mani in a.
You felt a unity kind of.
Yeah.
Like you were kind of all.
Yeah. Like. But anyway, when they carried her back to the name of the place that I can never remember, they're like. Sada Manda. But she was placed there, and we were all sitting around. It's interesting, the Westerners ended up sitting, the women from the East were sitting here, and we, the Westerners, a lot of us were sitting, the women especially, were sitting along the left side of Mani's body. And people were filing in a queue to garland her and bring her flowers. And what was interesting, all the Western women were allowed to just go right up. We didn't wait in line. For some reason, it was just so natural because of where we were. We all went up, and I actually placed all the garlands for all the people that I had mentioned in the LA group right over Mani's heart. I mean, it was just like we happened to be, instead of at her feet, we laid, all of us from LA were placed right at her heart, which I thought was really beautiful. And when we carried her down, then we took her down the hill. When she went down the hill, it was really, I couldn't get really close to see what Jeff saw of the cloth and the wood, but the feeling that I got, I mean, you could just feel the presence and the fire. To witness something like that as a Westerner, I mean, I think death is such a sort of like a hush-hush subject in this country, and you don't really ever get to experience it. To experience it in the way that these people do brought such peace to me, because it really was a transcendent moment in time. I mean, I felt no fear. I just felt joy for her, and I have to say that the flames and all that was quite intense to think that was Mani. But at the same time, you knew that she was with Baba. And it was amazing how few people were there. That's all I can say, is that it was a very intimate gathering. And the one last thing that I wanted to say was that I walked back as we all would go back at different times during the night or during the next few days. And one evening I went, and I was sitting there with the smoke sort of going over my body, and all of a sudden I had all these thoughts of the Holocaust. And I thought, why am I thinking such, horrible thoughts at her tomb here or at her pyre? And so I asked Bauji, my intuition was that she was connected to the Holocaust, that somehow Baba used her through that work. And when I asked Bao, we kind of passed it off at first and said, well, Mani was so joyful and Mani was, brought life to everybody. And so I kind of went, yes, but what did that mean? I mean, why would I have a thought like that sitting in front of her? And he said, well, it's due to past connection. So that's all he really said. I don't know if I was in the Holocaust and that was the memory of it, or that she actually was a party to that, but it was really powerful. You just felt like you knew that the burning was significant of things, layers and layers of worldly events that Baba used her specifically for, and that in some way it was all being released with the release of Mani's physical form. But it could go on and on. I've really talked way too long, Jake.
Well, it was you've heard a lot about all the details, and I guess we all have a little bit different perspective, but it was just as everyone is saying, it was very beautiful. And Mani was, when we went to Mandalay Hall in the morning, and the speed with which it all happened, remember she died at 7 in the morning, and we were at Mandalay Hall by 11. Was it 11 or 12 we got there? It was 11 we got there, so it was very short after. In the morning. This is in the morning. And she really was just radiant, just incredibly beautiful and peaceful. And one thing is that all the women, Dr. Goher in particularly, I think, they had just really exhausted themselves looking after Mani. I remember when we got there, I was talking to Katie the first day at Meherazad, and she goes, we're just, she would never say they're so tired, or she would never say, but you could just feel it. And she just looked at me and she goes, we're all fighting with Baba now. We don't understand why he won't take her. Why is she having to go through this? But if you really look at it, that's what, Katie, how she says things. But she, Mani went at home in her own bed, in Baba's home. So it was really very merciful and very beautiful. And we saw her, and she was so beautiful there, her just in front of Baba's chair, with her head towards the window and her feet towards the door, the front door there, and we all came around the back, and we got to bow down to Mani. And really just the peacefulness and the calmness of that morning. And then in the afternoon, when they brought her up on the hill, it's like Tamara was saying, there was a real wildness to me. I felt like there was very much a wildness to it, and really an electricity in the air, just such a charged environment. I can't even describe how charged it felt. And really when they took her body inside the tomb and laid it beside Baba, and then RustomSohrab came in, and they really, just their power, just the power of their conviction, and just it was really such an intensity like nothing I'd ever felt. And like Tamara was talking, from a Westerner's point of view, when someone dies here, it's a fairly legal matter, and there's things, but over there it's a strictly family affair, and that's what this was. And it was a very small number of people, although more and more people gathered as the afternoon progressed. And people, during the cremation, that's when it got the villagers, some of the villagers then, really pressing against, everything. And it was even hard for the women to even get close enough to put their flowers and everything on. And so just the intensity of the energy, and at the same time this complete peacefulness and calmness, all juxtaposed against each other. I can't even quite describe how it was. And people singing all through the whole thing, and Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai constantly. And then after the funeral pyre was lit and people stayed, and I just decided to stay on into the evening. And as the night wore on, I just decided I would stay all night because I just really couldn't pull myself away from it. I didn't really intend to stay all night the first night, but as it got to be just a few of us there, you could feel the calmness again, and you could feel Monty's energy there. And at one point, where she was laid out here was like this, and it was on a raised brick thing where the bricks were about this wide, and at one point I laid down right where her feet were, and I guess I dozed off for a minute. And when I awoke, it's like I felt her there, and just the peacefulness, just utter joy, really. Even though it was the passing of such a great soul, what I felt was just this incredible peacefulness and joy. And people continued to come all during that night. At about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, a car showed up with some Indian people that had driven 10 hours. As soon as they heard the news, they had gotten in their car, and they drove all this way, and they came to the fire, and they put flowers in and bowed down in the middle of the night, and then they went on. And then a couple hours later, at about 3, another car came. And these people had driven from Hyderabad, which is really such a long way, and they said, we came as soon as we heard. We drove all night. We tried to get a plane. So it was, people were so moved by it, and when they came, they, this is kind of just what happened. They came, and Erica was there, and he shined the light on it where the fire was, because at that time the fire had, was very small. And right then, it's as if some ashes fell away, and Monty's skull was just right there. And, these people took that as a great blessing. The Indian people, didn't know, it was a little startling, but they took it as a great blessing that she had made, that they could see that. And just over the next few days, everyone would come back to the fire, and like they said, it just kept burning, and we would sit there in the smoke. We would sit in the smoke and just let the smoke come in. It did come out, like Terry said, it came out of this one spot where the flame was coming out, right where her heart would be. It was just about right there, and it continued to burn. I remember that first night at about 1 a.m, they were saying, some of the residents there who've been through many cremations says, well, by tomorrow evening, this is the next day, the next evening, it'll have burnt out, and we can get the remains out and put them in the urn that they'll put them in. And I remember him saying that because at the next evening, there was no sign of the fire being anywhere near dying down to that level. So I think Monty just kept spreading it for a while, and I feel very, very, very blessed and fortunate to have been there during that time. And all of us thought of all of you repeatedly, and put many flowers on Monty's body. And Jai Baba.
I've got a couple of questions that have been formulating through everybody's talk, and I've got 4 questions, and I don't want to hog it, but I think there may be a lot of questions that other people want to ask too.
Could I say a couple of other things that I just jotted down here?
Yeah.
Before you start, just so I don't forget.
Right.
Okay, because there was a couple of things that I just have thought of while other people were talking. I just wanted to bring up a couple of these things. One was that despite, the fact that everyone was obviously saddened both before and after Monty's passing, Baba's and Monty's sense of humor shone through often. And there was an awful lot of, reminiscences about Monty, and with everyone, laughing and having a good time too. As whenever you start telling stories about Monty, people are inevitably going to laugh and enjoy themselves, because she was so, as Ted Judson said, she was the life of the party. So, for instance, there were 7 Western women who were apparently like the caregivers who were there. So there was always somebody with her around the clock, and it was Casey and Devana and Janet Judson and Shelley and Laurel McGreeny and Heather and I'm not sure. Anyway, there were 7 of them, so they started calling them the 7 dwarfs. And she was Snow White, who was sleeping in her glass box. So Erich would say, and how are the 7 dwarfs today? And then Erich got his fairy tales mixed up, so he would call her Sleeping Beauty with the 7 dwarfs. And then the actual day of her passing, there were people. It was the thing that was wonderful was that I remembered reading that Baba had once chastised the Mandali at Manzali Meme in the 1920s when his brother Jamshed had died, and several Mandali members had been in tears. And Baba had said to them, you're no better than a bunch of old women. He says, if you really, had faith in me, you would be weeping for joy for Jamshed, but you selfishly weep for your own loss and everything. And I thought of that, and then I also thought of when Rhoda Dubash's son died, and she thought Baba would not want her to grieve and to weep. And so she didn't weep, and then when she came to see Baba after her son's passing, Baba said to her, it's good for you to weep, it's good for you to grieve, and so she wept there in his presence. So I thought of these two contrasts, and how on one hand Baba made it sound as if our weeping would be selfish, and on the other hand, he encouraged us to be natural. And that's being natural was what really came out there. It was so interesting to see how the different people kind of took it. There was, weeping. There were also people who were laughing and telling jokes at the time of the whole, procession and the pyre. We had Erico Nadell, who comes over and he goes, wow, Money looks great, doesn't she? Doesn't she look terrific? What a great day. This is while everybody's, filing past, putting on the flowers. And he says, but I'll tell you something. He says, as good as Money looks, Mara looked even better. He says, you couldn't even look at Mara for too long because it would just burn your heart. That she was the radiance and the light coming off her was so intense. And I said, geez, Erico, I said, only you would, sit around and compare the bodies of Baba's, devoted female lovers. And he goes, yeah, you take Dr. Alu, she was nothing to get excited about. So you had this kind of stuff going on, which, yeah, that's what Lynn said. That man's been in India too long. So, but if Erico, for those of you who know Erico, if he'd been any other way, that would have been unnatural for him. And then you had Bao, who sat there and was clearly saddened, but just sat with such dignity, and just sat there with his cane and he had his dark glasses on. And there were empty chairs around him, and he would offer chairs. He told Danny to sit down, and so that each person grieved in their own way. But then it was incredible how life went on, and so we were back at Meherazad only a few days later, and the stories go on. And one thing that was interesting is that, and I think everybody probably saw this, Meheru seemed to be kind of coming to the forefront more and more. She was the one who took us all into Mara and Mani's room after, on the day of these reminiscences, you were allowed to go in there. And actually, you still are now. So, that room will be open, I guess, for all time now. And so she took everybody in and was showing them, Mani's bed and Mara's bed and telling the stories. And more she began telling stories. And clearly, this is something which she was not necessarily comfortable with a few years back, but which I think her tour of the West and now more and more she's going to be doing this. And so I think in the future when you go, it'll be Meheru who tells the stories out there. Arnavaz she didn't go into Mandali Hall when the body was on view there. She was sitting on the porch, on the veranda there at Baba's house. And I went to go into Baba's room at one point because it was so crowded in the hall. And I just wanted to go into Baba's room, and I saw Arnavaz, and she was sitting on the porch, and she saw me, and she smiled. She just beamed with this radiance. And he goes, Jai Baba. And I went up on the porch, and she took my hand, and we just sat there for like 20 minutes. And she barely mentioned Mani. It was so interesting, because there's Mani, lying in the other room, and clearly Arnavaz felt the loss as much as anyone. And yet all she could talk about was Baba. And it was during that talk that she talked about it, and it came back to me. Bao talked about it. Even Muhammad the Must kind of made reference to me about it. The theme for me, and I always used to tease Mark DeMattis, who would come back from India and say, it took me a while to figure out what the theme was on this trip. And I'd go, sure there. And I felt that whole thing of that suffering that Mani had gone through, too, that was something for all of us. Bao also talked about it in a very moving talk where he discussed the pain that he'd gone through in surgery when, I don't know if most of you knew this or not, but his anesthesia didn't really take, so he was not conscious enough to be able to tell them that he was feeling pain, but he was able to feel the pain as they were cutting into him during his surgery. And yet he said that it was a blissful pain because he felt Baba so strongly there. And so it's actually to accept that suffering as coming from Baba, and not just the good things as coming from Baba, but even the suffering we go through. And that came back again and again on this trip. So many people saying things. And the whole story with Muhammad the Must is a story which I'll tell some other time, because it was actually quite funny, but also pretty profound in itself. Let me just go through a couple of my other notes here. Josh and Janani's notes to Money that we carried over there were read to her. She wasn't really conscious, but every note was read aloud to her. And the women Mandali, Goher and Mehru and Arvaz, all commented on how much they had appreciated that, because I think that those notes sustained, the other Mandali as much as Mani. Mani was at that point no longer conscious, although I'm sure that in some sense she was aware of what was being read to her. And I was going to say to David McNeely, maybe you should try and for the lamppost, the stuff that Josh and Janani wrote was really wonderful, and it's just, children can somehow cut through so much, and it was just really beautiful. I wish that I don't have a copy of it here or anything to read it, but maybe it could go in the lamppost, because it was really wonderful, and it meant an awful lot to them. I wanted to also say, and again, I'm now hogging the mic, but it's hard to come back after being there, but it's great to come back to all of you, and just about everybody in this room, almost everyone, certainly the ones whose names I know. At one point or another in the tomb, at one point I went in the tomb and I just thought, I'm going to try and think of every person in the LA group, and think of every name and every face, and just have them here with me now. And one of the garlands that Tamara bought, we also laid down for the LA in the name of the LA group. And it's hard to come back where most people around us aren't even asking the same questions as us, much less coming up with the same answer, which is Meher Baba. And I wanted to say to the people who could be there, clearly, we all feel, quite grateful that we were there. But I think of Jacko and Becky and Adam Caraco, who were there for weeks, before we got there. They had kind of rearranged their schedule because they thought Money would pass, and Jacko wanted to be there when she went. And they were scheduled to come back, and they kept waiting and thinking, well, should we delay it? Should we not delay it? And then the word came from Goher that Money was comatose, and this could go on for weeks. And so they decided, okay, we'll go back. So they went and spent a night in Pune with the twins, and they called back over to Meherazad. Any change? No, because they were prepared to come back if Money did pass away. They went to Lanavla, which is that hill station on the way to Bombay, and they called the twins and said, any change? No. They went to Bombay and called again, still prepared to come back, and still no change. And the twins actually called Meherazad while Jacko was in Bombay, and then called him back and says, no, there's no change. It could be, no one knows how long this could go. So they take off, I guess at 2 in the morning or whatever, and at 7 o'clock, 7:01, she passes away. They call from London to see how, what's new, and they find out that she's passed away. And we all felt pretty badly about it, but on the other hand, I know Money had told, Shireen Bonner, her niece, and Franny, her sister-in-law there in New Mexico, had said to them, because they were wondering, should they drop everything and try and come, even though it was financially difficult. Money says, no, stay there, I'll be with you there. And I really felt that probably that was the case with Jacko too. I think she was probably out of that body a long time before she actually passed away. And of course, once you're out of once you pass, apparently, your soul is roaming free. And so I feel very strongly that she was probably with everybody here tonight, and that she is probably, still now. And so, although, I know I've talked to some people say, oh, I wish I could have been there. And yeah, it was wonderful to be there, but she will give you her gift, and Baba will give you her gift in their own way. And, so I wouldn't feel necessarily like you've missed anything, because Baba will make up for it in so many ways. And I also would say to anybody who wasn't able to get to India while she was around, because it was so wonderful to be in her presence. But if you weren't able to experience that, Baba again will make up for it. I don't think you need to feel like any great loss over that. I mean, clearly it's hard to say that because she meant so much to so many of us. But again, Baba, as he will for a long time to come, he'll fill up the cup. Whatever Money used to fill up, Baba will now fill up. So don't despair over that either. So I think that pretty much covers my notes here. Jay Baba. Oh, one other thing I have. When Money, her face apparently changed quite a bit. From the moment she passed, everyone said she had a very peaceful look on her face. Several people who looked at her face as she was lying there noticed sort of the hint of a smile, which I kind of felt too. I really felt like at some point she might just sit up and say, I got you. You know? And Heather, though, said that as they were on their way up the hill, the Meherazad hill, up to the Samadhi, that at that moment, that she was quite startled because she said Money really got this sort of triumphant look on her face. Mm-hmm. And Meheru also, Heather, I think, said to Meheru, am I crazy? Or was it? And Meheru said, no, she noticed it too. And so I guess the soul is still, connected with the body in such a way that could happen, And Heather, what she likened it to was after there was some really difficult trust problem, that Money was dealing with, that like some big meeting that was bound to explode and everything, and Money had handled it beautifully as she often, so often did. And then Heather would see her when she got back to Meherazad and say, so how'd that meeting go? And Money would go, it went just splendidly. And kind of patting herself on the back a little bit like, I was able to, pull it off, kind of, and this look of real triumph and just delight. And she said that was the look that she had on her face as they went up Meherazad Hill. So, Jai Baba.
Well, we'll see. Would you guys mind taking a few questions if people have any questions? Would anyone like to ask a question? Dinah, I'll try to paraphrase just for the recording or for people who can't hear.
Oh, right. Well, after all that, the questions that were formulating as you were talking were more material things, what actually happened. But at the end of it, my God, it's all so profound, I feel. Number one, Jeff, I'd like to thank you for your little vigil in the tomb there where you thought of us all. Yes, that was very sweet.
Okay, will feedback if I give it to Dinah?
That was really lovely. The other questions that I had, do I really need that?
Well, no one can hear you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, hopefully some of you are as trite as I am that you want to ask these questions, so I'm doing it for you. There seems to have been, when you say you lay right beside the pyre and there weren't that many people there was nobody being official or saying get back and you can't do this or that you could do just whatever you wanted to?
That was it, like 3 or 4. That was at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and that was after most everyone had left, and the only people that were there were, as Terry said, 4 or 5 guys from the youth Sahabas, the younger guys, myself, and I think Ted was there at that point.
Official Indians there at all?
No. We were the officials. I hate to startle you like this, but we were the. They had asked Jaw. Yeah, Jaw Destur had come up during the original ceremony and said, "I need some guys to keep watch that night." And we were originally going to do it in shifts, like Erich and Anise were going to do one shift, and Dana and Andrew Meyer, Jim Meyer's son Andrew Meyer, was going to do another shift, and then I was going to do one with somebody, and then there was going to be a resident that relieved us at say 1 or 2 in the morning. I think that's when Erico came back, and but we were also overwhelmed by the feeling there that none of us wanted to leave, so we all stayed until sunup.
Well, all in all, about how many people were there? Like in Mundley Hall, you said there were so few people. How many Westerners were at the Pilgrim Center?
4. So 56.
But also hostility had some people. There was probably about 70 Westerners, but and at Mandalay Hall in Meherazad, see, there weren't that many people because the word hadn't really gotten out.
It all happened so fast.
There was maybe 150 people in Mandalay Hall.
It started to be more people came. I think by the end.
Between 80 to 150, somewhere in there. But there were several hundred people up on the hill.
Yeah, several hundred, yeah.
I've got 2 more questions, so then I'll ask these and then give it to you, and you can answer them both. These are sort of technical questions, never having. Well, the only cremation I've been to was where the door slid up and the coffin slid in and it went down and you never saw anything. Was her body covered with sticks or something, or did you actually see the body in flames?
No, you don't see the body.
You don't see the body.
It was a huge fire, too.
Huge,
It was,
huge
I
flames.
would say they were.
Okay, well, hold on a sec. Let me ask the other question because we all want to hear what you're saying. Okay, so then you can answer that too. I heard the story from a person of Alicia Dreyfus that when Erich had got up on the pyre to place sandalwood under Money's head, and when he came down, he was saying this to himself, but there were crowds around there, and he had to turn to avoid, getting from the people. And as he was getting down, and he turned, he was directly facing Alicia. That is Robert Dreyfus's wife, right? Alicia and Elisa. And he said more to himself, finally, my job is finished. Well, Michael Ramsden told me that Erich had told him many, many years ago when Michael was in India that Baba had charged Erich with looking after money. And can you give us your thoughts on the appearance of the pyre and that last statement?
I really don't have much to say about the last statement. I did hear that Erich said, my job is finished. No one asked him. That's what, but Elisa told me that at dinner.
Is Erich now going to go next week?
Soon. Soon. I think soon. But he's very ready. He's very ready. But but it's like Tamara said, when we came out of Mandalay Hall that morning, I remember he grabbed me by the arm and he goes, "What's wrong with you people?" That's exactly what he said. Yeah.
But what he said to Lynn, my sister, and to me, we kind of came up to him together. He says, "I'm not leaving you." He said that.
I think he meant spiritually.
I don't know, but he just said something to the effect. No, here. I think
He said, I'm not leaving you. I'll see you at 4 o'clock on the hill. But, no, I as much as I hate to say it, I got the feeling like, it won't be long. Devana said that that over the last month and a half, he's really deteriorated. He has, this condition where it's hard for him to keep his mouth closed and to chew. And he can't hear very well. He has sort of a hard time getting around. But it is funny because he keeps that same razor-sharp sense of humor and everything. And Tamara and I were laughing about it because they tell you when you first get there, again, some of these Westerners and stuff, they say, the Mandalay are very old and frail, so only one hug a day. So we prefer that you hug him, as you arrive and don't hug him as you're leaving. So, at the end of the day, you'd see Erich and he'd come over and say, "Goodbye, brother," or something. And I'd say, "I can't hug you because I already had my one hug." And he would, look at me like this. And sometimes one time he grabbed me and started kind of wrestling. And then another time he kept hugging me like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I go, "You're going to get me in trouble. You're going to get us both thrown out of here." And I think Tamara went through the same kind of thing with him. So, he's kept that. But, and I'd see him at Meherazad. I always remember asking him one time, I said, "Erich, do you pray?" And he said, "Well, I don't say the prayers, but I do pray." And I said, "How do you pray?" And he says, "Well, I wake up in the morning and I go, I'm alive." And he says, "Thank you, Baba, for giving me another day to serve you and help me to serve you." And then at night, he says, "Thank you, Baba, for having given me this day to serve you, and now please let me die in my sleep." And then when he wakes up, he goes, I'm alive. So I would, like when you get there, I would always say to him, "So you're still alive?" And he goes, "Still lingering, damn it all." So, and as far, he was charged with taking care of Money, as Money had been charged with taking care of Mara. So he's 80.
2 years.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So could you describe what the pyre looked like?
She was lying on, I guess, a bunch of sandalwood was underneath her, so there was sandalwood all underneath her stretcher, I guess they put on there. And then...
Was the stretcher plain? Was there something
No,
draped
oh
over
no,
the
it was
stretcher?
beautiful. It was all wrapped in this beautiful cloth. It was pink. I'm trying to remember, pink and yellow flowers. if I can remember. But
there were so many flowers.
There were so many flowers, and they kept putting all, and they took all the flowers, but they put all the flowers back on her. They put them all back on her, and so yeah, she looked beautiful. And then they put more sandalwood all around her body, and more flowers, and then they put another sheet over her, and so. Yeah, I think so. It was more like a thicker cloth, if I remember. Yeah, everything was covered, and the women did all this. The women did all the men stayed back, and the women did all the final things to put around her. They were putting sandalwood, but they were putting something on the wood. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what they did.
She had been saving sandalwood for 15 years.
Yeah, I said that. She had been saving sandalwood, yeah.
Good quality.
Yeah, that's the quality. And so what they did was they built up, they put on these huge pieces of logs, huge wood, but it wouldn't.
It was like a cabin.
Yeah, but it was building a log cabin around her. Yeah. No, it wasn't directly on her. It was like above her, but she was surrounded in wood. Like that, and then the men did all this part, finished building up, and it was very high. It was about this high. It was very high, and then they put this ghee butter that had this incense in it or oil in it. They rubbed that all over it, and they sprinkled this white stuff all over it, and more sandalwood on top. And then I don't remember who exactly it was that actually lit it. They all had torches, actually.
All the men.
All the men, and they would just saying like this frenzy of Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai, Mani Ki Jai, or what they were saying. They were just saying over and over and over. And at first it was a puff of black smoke that came up that burnt the ghee and burnt the whatever they had in there. And the logs were drenched in kerosene because you could smell that. They were all drenched. They were like drenched in kerosene. And so after that initial black puff of smoke, it was all these beautiful flames dancing. And it looked like the flames were breathing in and breathing out. I can't tell you what it looked like. It wasn't just flames. It was this whipping and dancing and moving, and it was just unbelievable. It was like this beautiful dance. And once, my mind would go, oh my gosh, it's money, but then in another sense, it wasn't. It was like this beautiful thing that was for everyone. It was for all time. And I'm drawing pictures of it as I can remember. But I was behind Meru, and she's pointing out, and she said, look, there's Zoroaster's face. Now it's Baba's face. And look how everyone is dancing. Look at all these forms dancing around, in the pyre. And then she asked Ted to sing that song, the Song of the Dance. Is that how it goes? Lord of the Dance. I don't know if anyone here knows it, but that was the most unbelievable moment when that was being sung, because all the women were singing with him.
Terry, did anyone at all take photos?
No, there were no recordings, no video, no recording, no recording in any kind.
So much of Baba.
Nothing.
None for Mara and Mani, because they both wanted it that way. I think they wanted the focus to be Baba.
Yeah, and not pictures.
Question about how does the place feel?
It's Mani, then Goer, then Meru, then Katie, then
David's got the pictures.
yeah, Khorshid, and then Mansari. So it's 6. And Mani's will be the largest. I think
Katie
it's
only if she doesn't marry.
yeah.
Says it in the trust.
If she doesn't marry. So yeah, okay.
I wanted to say one more thing about the whole experience of that. After the third day, on the morning, they go through the ashes and they take her bones out, wet big pieces, and then carefully sift through all of the other pieces and get even the small pieces out from the ashes, and that's what they put in the urn. And we were there that morning. Jeff was there, Lynn was there, Terry was there. The bones don't burn. They burn, but small ones.
Well, I mean,
it's not like big bones. It's pieces of bones. September 8th. And one morning I was up in the Samadhi, and there was another woman there, a woman from Pune that I'd met before, Indian woman. And she pointed to the tomb cloth, and someone's, how the red mark from bowing down gets on there, and she pointed it. She was getting ready to leave, and she pointed that, and she looked over at me, and she said, "This is a good omen." So then she left, and I was sitting there for a while, and then all of a sudden I heard, and I went outside, and they were starting to dig where they're going to put Mani. So I sat there for a while and watched, and then I said, boy, I'd really like to dig a little bit just to do it, you know. So, but I said, I don't want to interrupt this process. They had the guys there that did it. So I started walking downhill, and I'll tell you, my feet really just turned themselves like that. Even though I was just saying, I'll go to Pilgrim Center. But really, I turned around and went back up, and so I dug some of the hole and pulled some of the dirt out. Very little, but just, there was something for me that felt really to have done it, and it felt really like a completion thing after seeing the whole process to do that. And I took, it was, so there were little things all along the whole trip, I think definitely for all of us, just different things at different times. One other thing what Jeff was talking about, Erich, it's really so true, he's so funny. Craig Ruff went there and he had a cold, and he said, Erich, I can't hug you, I have a cold. So Erich like chases him around the whole rest of the day trying to get a hug so he can get sick.
I'm the police. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Who knows what time? Guys, I think it's getting... You guys want to stay for more questions? I thought we can continue this. Yeah, okay, we'll take a couple more. Okay, Marco was first, actually.
Where exactly was the pier? Was it by the...
Very briefly.
As I was saying, if you come out of the Pilgrim Center and you're walking, if you look toward the hill, it's not across the track. It's on the same side as the Pilgrim Center, but it's just like directly to your left. There's a field. There's sort of a hill and then another hill, and it was right there. When you go there, there's like 3 different platforms that are permanent, like cremation platforms. So you just never notice it because it's out of sight.
The bus.
Yeah,
it's behind. It's further over that way. It's like directly across from us. But if you went like another 100 yards after the bus.
You'll see it.
Yes, across from the Ag Center.
Like a little...
Yeah, but there's like a sort of a decline in the land there, and
it's almost like a little marsh bed or something.
Yeah.
But it does have a little sort of...
Yes.
There's a little metal roof and a platform. Yeah. I think that's kind of that's sort of the traditional cremation site.
I just have one question. Before we go, can we sing the song that was passed around to everyone? Singing to the beloved. It's my
Sure.
Sure.
Like you're going to get anybody who's going to say no to that, Wendy?
Okay, Will.
Would you feel like telling us about Muhammad?
Oh. Yeah, well, just very briefly, just because that was kind of, as I say, if there was a theme, it had to do with this theme of the suffering and accepting it. I said to Errico at one point, I said, ask Muhammad if he thinks you're mad, Errico. And so he asked him, and he said, Muhammad said to Errico, you understand. And I was impressed by that. I thought, wow, for him to say, you understand, Errico. So then Errico, I didn't ask him to say this, but Errico said, what about him, about me? And Muhammad looked right at me and started laughing. And he goes, he doesn't understand a damn thing. That's Errico's translation. And he says, but he's a good man. And then there was a servant who Errico is teaching to read Marathi. And so she started reading, and she was reading one of Upasni Maharaj's discourses. And in it, it says we must accept suffering as God's will without complaint. And at that, and I was listening carefully, and Errico was translating it line by line as she was reading it. And Muhammad looked at me on that line and then says to Errico, now he's beginning to understand. So I think that was the thing that kind of hit me about this whole trip. Like money's passing. I must say, to me, it looked like a great fire. I didn't see Baba's face in there, but I never see that kind of thing. I mean, there was nothing really supernatural about any of it. It's like Gary Kleiner was even wondering if it's because of the aged sandalwood and the ghee that the white flame was going, and he says, I'm going to start saving sandalwood right now. I don't want anybody seeing a black flame when I go. So I don't know about that. The thing that was supernatural to me about it was Baba's love that was coming through so strongly. Whether there was any of this other stuff, I think that's a lot of that's in the eye and the heart of the beholder, which is all valid. But I think Baba's love was so strong, and I came back just feeling, more than ever that the only thing that's important, that same thing like Baba says, nothing matters but God, love for God. Nothing is real but God, and so that was the overall feeling, I think.
Okay, no more questions? Uh-oh. Yes, Joyce. We really should wrap up soon, though, I feel. This is for Jeff. Okay, go ahead, Joyce.
Did you see the song that came?
No, we just heard about it
I did.
later.
Yeah, I saw it. How long did they stay around?
They weren't there that long. They just came. They spoke briefly with Erich, and then they just sort of, bowed to the flame, to the funeral. Yeah, and then they just walked off and walked on their way.
Who said they were sadhus?
I guess Erich did. That's Erich described them as. Oh, well,
No. They're just, in other words, they're just renunciates.
Yeah, renunciates. One dressed all in white, and one had like a yellow scarf and something on his head. I just saw these two people talking to Erich just briefly. So that was that.
Okay, this is my suggestion. We can continue this over refreshments. You can meet with the fresh returnees. We can meet with them. No, this is what we'll do. Oh, yes, Wendy.
Is that a good fresh returnee? Is that a good job?
Okay, so this is what we'll do. Okay, this is what we'll do. We'll close with the beloved player only, but really mean it. And then we'll sing the song. Wait a sec. And then we'll sing the song that Wendy has requested for all the homies. Check this.
Wait, let me say one other thing, because a bunch of people asked me before about Bao and how he's doing. And I didn't want to have to repeat this a million times afterwards. He seems to be doing remarkably well. He looks great. He seems to be in good spirits. He would come sometimes to the Pilgrim Center looking kind of, tired, and then he would talk, and as everyone knows, after 2 hours of talking, he seemed revitalized, and he seemed like he could have gone on a long time, except that there was always, time to go up to Artie. Again, he so many times mentioned the LA group. He said that in May, when he normally would have been here, that he would be sitting there thinking about what he would have been doing and how he would have been here at the center and how he would have been at Meherana and how much he missed everybody. And even his daughter-in-law, Raj, said to me, "Oh, he missed all of you so much." He's having chemotherapy, and it causes a burning in him, he said. And he would give a talk on the same day that he got the chemo treatment a couple of times. And yet, he just seemed great. And again, he sends all his love to everybody here.
Go visit him.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
Richie.
Back over. I don't think he'll be coming back to the West because he's got so much responsibility now. He'll become the chairman of the trust. And he said in the past he could leave stuff for money and she could just sign it and everything when the time came, and now there's no one to do that. He very reluctantly, he's chairman of the trust, so.
I just wanted to, and after his last talk that we were all sitting, the LA group was around him, but there was still some other people there, and he just looked into all of our eyes, and it was so sweet, and he said each of our names, he says, and all the LA people, he says, "I just want you to know how much I love you. I love all of you so much." And we're like his family. So he loves to hear from people. He loves to be connected. Because he can't come here, so he loves to hear about what's going on with you. And, but it was so sincere. And I thought, oh my gosh, he does. He loves us. He really loves us all, like a family. And it was so touching. That was so really touching.
Well, thank you to Jeff and Tamara, Terry, and Billy. I'm sorry. Wait a second. No, actually I have my own. But I also would like to just say thank you. Also, first, last, and always to Baba, and to Mani, and to Baba for Mani. What an incredible gift to creation. And I also would like to thank Rosalie, who called all of you, I imagine, to Richie and Ken, who always put up this pandal for all of us, and to everyone, Chris and Chris for the music tonight, and of course to all of you for being so patient and sitting through this wonderful evening here. Okay, great. 1, 2.